Welcome, everybody. Welcome those of you who are joining. Do feel free to put your cameras on. It's optional, but it's always nice to see people's faces. Welcome. If you feel so moved to do so, feel free to say hello in the chat. It's also nice to hear where people are from and how you're feeling right now. Welcome to the AWA Meetup. We'll be getting started in just a little while. Going to let a few more people join as there's the waiting room is filling up. I'll keep letting people in. Welcome. Good to see some familiar names and faces and some new ones as well.
All right, buddy.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, mate, you?
Good, good.
People from all over the world as well in the chat. So feel free, those who've just joined, welcome. We'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. Feel free to say hello in the chat and say how you're feeling. Fantastic. And also where you're from. And I'm going to put everybody on mute for a second, just so that there we go. Cool. So good to see people from all over the world, as I was saying, from US, from Europe, all over the UK. Great. So we'll just take 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll get going. Someone says I've been in the sun. Ian. Yeah, no, I have been in the sun. I've been trying to make the most of this weather, and the English sun here is it's one of those. You can be out in a short time and get burnt, and us English see the sun so very rarely that I try and get out in it. Anytime there's a gap in the clouds, that's me out in the sun. So hence I've got a bit of a red face today. I'm sure it will turn brown fairly soon. So welcome. Okay, fantastic. So I'll continue to let people in as they arrive. And also feel free to keep saying hello or where you're from if you haven't done already in the chat. And also as we go along, if you want to ask questions and things in the chat as well, I'll let David describe how he wants to manage that sort of thing as we go. So I'd like to just say a quick welcome and just give some information about a few things going on at AWA. And then I shall introduce David and hand over to David for the rest of the evening. So first of all, thank you for joining us. It's especially on this sunny evening, at least here in the UK. I've heard that the weather over in Europe is not so good. And I guess it's a bit earlier in the day in the US. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work first time. So hopefully you can see making working life better. Is that good? Let me see that. Fantastic. So this is really what AWA is all about. So many of you have been to various different AWA meetups over the years, and I just like to remind us all about why we're here, about sort of making other people's working life better and making our own working life better through the sort of hard work of self-development and helping others to develop themselves as well, whether that be an individual, a team, or an organization. And this is really the heart of why AWA exists as a community of practice, which is just to make the world a little bit better than how we found it. And this has really been at the heart of the community of practice that we have run over the years. So we will be working with David, which is a fantastic and exciting course coming up, and we'll be. Oh, this is tonight's meetup. Where is the course? There we go. No, wrong one. There we go. Fantastic. We'll get there in the end. So we'll be running or David will be running a team coaching course later on in the year in July. And this is really, really excited to be working with David. I'm going to introduce David in a minute, and you'll kind of see why I'm so excited. But this is a fantastic opportunity for team coaches to really understand and experience and learn the real art of team coaching. So moving on and going deeper from one-to-one coaching into actual team coaching. I'm very excited to host David with that later on in the year. So if you do want to hear about this or or learn about this or our next course that I'd like to share with you, if I can get the slides to work again. This is an Agile coaching cohort that we're running in May. And so this is for Agile coaching. And there's a little bit of team coaching in there as well. There's one-to-one coaching, teaching, mentoring, and all the things that you would expect from an Agile coach. And this is a 9-month cohort program, which will result if you do the experience and you pass the accreditation, result in the IC Agile Team Coach Expert. And so these two programs go very, very well together. And so if you're interested in that as well, then on our website, you can see more information and also sign up for that as well. And also, if you want to learn more information about either of these, just give us an email at training@adventureswithagile.com. I'd like to now introduce David. And yeah, so I mean, David has, I don't even know where to begin. It's such an incredible history of 4 decades of sort of pioneering the entire coaching and mentoring profession. And it seems that every book that I read or every piece of research that I get into, I find somewhere it's got David's fingerprints or some kind of input into. And certainly when I was researching and doing a lot of my coaching in the early days, it would seem that everybody was referring me to David's work. And so to have him here is really fantastic. I think, David, you've written something like over 6, at least contributed or written something like over 60 books, 65 books over. Yeah, oh, sorry, I muted you earlier when I was muting everybody. If you would like to come off mute.
I would say it's over 70 now.
Over 70 books, isn't that absolutely incredible? What a contribution. David also co-founded the EMCC, European Mentoring and Coaching Council, which really is the standardized body of work for sort of setting the standards of this industry. And it's just such a phenomenal force that has really crafted this the industry that we now partially take for granted. And it's the kind of world that most of us have come into this, either whether it's agile coaching or professional coaching, has been shaped in one way or another, through David's work over the years. And so it really is an absolute honour to have him here and to learn from him, so that we can take some of that wisdom directly. So I'll pass over to you, David, with great enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Now I'm going to try and share my screen and hope that it works as well as we did just now. Although I now can't see the files on the slide on any of the slides. Hang on, let's see what happens. Right, let's go. Here we go. All right, let's try and share desktop one or 2 even. Right, share. I hope that works. We have success. Great, brilliant. Okay, so what Simon asked me to talk about this time is this whole issue of what happens after COVID, when we all go back to the new normal and what it looks like. So I'm going to go through some slides, then we'll just open it up for discussion, and I'll try and make it as as swift an overview of the information as I can. Here's the problem. We've got all these teams that have never worked virtually before. They're struggling to just work out how the hell do we do things in a completely different environment. Some teams have adapted well, other teams not so well. The trouble is that the leadership style that so many leaders had of being sort of in control of things and knowing everything doesn't work in this environment. The only way it works is when people are basically focusing on nice, narrowly defined jobs. But if you've got to have teamwork, then it all starts to fall apart. And part of this is related to social interaction. We're going to talk a lot about that. And when you lose your social interaction, people get more anxious, there's more stress, and we're seeing all sorts of issues around mental health problems. And basically, in general, virtual teams don't perform as well as co-located teams. You can make them do so, but it takes a lot of work, and it needs not better norms. So teams that are just dumped into this environment have been struggling quite highly. The saving grace is because people have been at home. In many cases, people have delivered more output, but that doesn't actually help you for the future. So some of the challenges we've got, this issue of how do we develop closer partners? So by this we mean, how do we maintain that collegial atmosphere and that sense of being a team when we're not able to actually see each other except on a Zoom call with a strange background? And how can we learn to work more effectively virtually than we did face to face? Again, a lot of teams have struggled with this. Now, so there's a whole lot of work that coaches have been doing to help them at least get some of the way towards performing something like the way that they did before. Can we emerge stronger from this crisis? And when we do finally all get back into working in a different way, how can we hit the ground running? Given the fact that the probability is that for most people who've now got a taste of working at home, they're not going to want to go back into that same environment as they had to commuting 5 days a week. So if we just go back to where we were, we'll have lost a great opportunity. We've got this potential for reflecting, which is what coaching is all about, for learning to work in different ways, and for better connections with each other within the team and with the stakeholders of the team. So we part of our role now is to maintain people's hope and people's resilience as they've actually learned from this. And this is going to be needed. We can't just breathe a sigh of relief the moment that we start to go back to normal or new normal. There's going to be a lot of picking up of the pieces, and most of it may not be obvious. A critical issue here is social capital. I'm going to explore this in a little bit more detail, but social capital, that is something that's been one of the big casualties. People have lost connection with others. And so if you think about it, in 2019, 5% of people work from home some or part of the time. It's now 45%. It's going to stay at least 35% for the foreseeable future, people working part of their time from home. And while day-to-day performance isn't affected, in fact, may even improve from working at home, it's going to the team performance, the collective performance tends to deteriorate, and the social capital is the big issue. And so lack of social capital is related to all sorts of things. So obesity, heavy smoking, anxiety, stress disorders, a whole big range of issues that come out of it. And so if we look at how we define social capital, so it's the resources that we get from the variety and the quality of our connections with other people. And the way that we build social capital is by engaging in as a community. Now, interestingly, one of the pieces of research to come out of the last 12 months suggests that actually men and women have a different way of building social capital. So women tend to build more social capital more by talking with each other. Men tend to build social capital more by doing things together. So one of the outputs of this is, as coaches, can we help the people that we're coaching to, if they're men, can we help them to actually have projects they do together, so they're interacting on something that they see an outcome from, rather than just talking about things. This can be a big issue, I think, and is growing. So Men need shared experiences. They, all of us need sort of some sense of touch. The fact that we haven't been able to hug our grandchildren or our relatives has been a real big issue. Even now, you know, we're socially distancing. I went up at last week to Derby, where my mother had her 100th birthday, and you know, all we could do, we couldn't actually hug. We could only talk to her through the screen as she opened her card from the Queen. You know, we missed a lot of that. This is really something quite hard, and this whole issue of weak social interactions or connections. It seems that to remain healthy, we need to have at least 6 and typically twice that many interactions with people, just to chat with the postman for a couple of seconds, or to comment with when you pass a baby in a pram and say something nice about the baby, and have a couple of sentences with people. These weak social interactions are critical. And some experiments recently with scientists working in the Antarctic, all on their own for weeks on end. They measured their brain density before they set off for their weeks of isolation and when they came back. And their brain density diminished significantly while they were away because they weren't having the social interactions. This is powerful stuff. And so some of the solutions that we've seen in place. So more social activities online. One of the things that we've learned to do is to have do some improv online. There's a wonderful improv game that I was taught, where basically you choose 3 people at random. They all become the presenter of a TV program, and a completely different kind. So it could be a party political broadcast, a sports one, a soap, or whatever. And then you give them the theme, and you give them each of them a different theme. And so then you play as if you've got the remote control and you're channel hopping. So one of them starts to talk about the theme that you've given them, which is important, which is, you know, related to the team's work. And then when they've got half a sentence in, you change channels. So whether another one has to continue the same conversation. Absolutely hilarious, enables people to gel together, to laugh together. Virtual hugs, you know, giving people a virtual hug on screen is a great thing. Getting people to say thank you to each other and encourage each other. Make it a point of giving each other encouragement, and this appropriate curiosity, getting to know people's families and so forth, getting to know the whole person. It's particularly important in some other cultures, where, you know, they won't really get comfortable doing business with you until they know you as a human being. So we really don't know enough about our colleagues, and as coaches and mentors, we can help teams to do more of this. So some of the things we can be thinking about. What about us and our health? Yeah, we've all been sitting in our chairs getting Zoom bum for the last year. You know, how are we coping? What are our strategies? You know, what's happened with our social capital? One of the most fascinating things that I tried was just going through my old emails from years ago and just reconnecting with people I hadn't spoken to for years. The amazing, the positive that comebacks from people that were just delighted that somebody had sought to do it. Just a simple thing to do. When you're on a coaching call, rather than getting down to business straight away, spend that extra bit of time recreating the social connection, the human side of the relationship, and looking for all those signs of isolation stress. Are our clients actually suffering from being isolated? What can we help them build their own strategies for building their social capital, for interacting more effectively and more frequently with other people? These are all things that we can do straight away. When people go back to the workplace, we can expect an explosion of survivor syndrome. So survivor syndrome, as it's described here, it's the mixture of negative, mostly emotions that survivors feel. And it can last for months, sometimes years. And the symptoms of survivor syndrome, we see a lot of sadness, depression and guilt. It could have been me. And also, well, it still could be me next time. So this insecurity that you get angry that it's so unfair. So there's this injustice and feeling that the psychological contract we have with the company, it's been broken. And just because I still got my job doesn't mean to say, I shouldn't feel enraged about the whole thing. So you've got all of these symptoms going on. And a big job now as we begin to come back to normal is for coaches to help people in organizations to overcome survivor syndrome and get back to a healthy mental state about their relationship to their employer and their job role and themselves. So for leaders in particular, they need to be able to talk openly about what's going on. They need to be able to, sorry, let me just go back to this one. They need to be able to talk openly about it. They need to go back to the psychological contract. Has it been broken? They need to say, okay, it isn't fair. Life isn't fair. And they need to bring in their coaches and mentors internally in the organization and externally to support people, to say there is support for you getting through this whole process. One of the things that I've seen to be most effective is for the leader basically to say, look, it's the toughest thing I've had to do. So those people who've left the organization, there's a whole potential here for maintaining contact with them. Do we just say, well, they've gone, forget it? We write them out of the history, or do we actually keep a relationship with them? Because sure as eggs, people will want that contributes to the healthiness of the organization. And so how do we build resilience for the future? These that lose these lessons, these are all things we can help them with. So if the leaders can admit their own vulnerability, their own sense of imposter syndrome, of survivor syndrome, that how it's been like for them, they can grieve with everybody else. They not rather than be seen as isolated. Well, they're all right. They've still got their their nice car and all the rest of it. But what about all those other people who suffered? You can talk about how people go through grief. But as it says on the slide, don't get too sucked in by a lot of the pseudoscience around this. The Kubler-Ross grief curve of grief isn't a fixed process. It's nowhere near that. It's a number of things that people experience, but not everybody goes through it in the same way, at the same speed, or even in the same structure. But recognizing that the key to resilience and getting through grief is to support each other. Just encourage people to share their experience, their feelings. And in team meetings too, we found, how are you feeling about coming back to work now? What are your biggest fears, your biggest hopes? Getting people to be open about this enables them to deal with survivor syndrome and the related grief and disappointment. Looking at the psychological contract too, how can we remake it, rebuild it so it's stronger than it was before? Between all of the employees and volunteers, if it's a charity, the leadership and others, and the people, the stakeholders, and the contracts, the conversations that need to happen for all of those to occur. Throughout it all, the critical weapon that we have and that leaders have is compassion. And I think if we are compassionate, then that underpins rather the sense of fairness. We can begin to rebuild the sense of fairness. And I think compassion has 4 components. So there's the way that this is the reflective process of thinking about how we think, thinking about how we feel, feeling about how we think, and feeling about how we feel. If we can regularly do that as a coach, we start to build our sense of compassion. If we can enable our clients to do that, even better, because then they can have more compassion, particularly for themselves. And I think that's the critical question that we as coaches ask our clients. How can you have more compassion for yourself? If you have more compassion for yourself, you have more compassion for others. And of course, it's a question we have to ask for ourselves. And then this lovely issue. Where are we in terms of the balance between feeling guilt and shame and feeling arrogance? This zone of functionality where we have hope and collegiality and justifiable pride. And all these other factors, the irrational optimism, avoidance of responsibility, blame and despair. Being in the middle here, we avoid getting into either of those triangles. But what's going on for the individual? What's going on for the organization? What's going on for us? These are all, this is just a way of, I think, of representing it and seeing these issues. So questions we can ask the leaders. To the leader, what is your responsibility for supporting other people through this difficult time? What can make this a happy place to work once more? What do your stakeholders need and your customers need from you now? The resources you can pull upon to speed recovery, how you can forgive yourself for what's happened. The small achievements right now, the little steps towards recovery, all that anger and resentment that people are going to be having from survivor syndrome. Can you regenerate that into more positive ways? And how could you grow and become a stronger person, more resilient person as a result of what we've gone through? I think these are really powerful questions. And if we want to focus this specifically on resilience, these 4 questions I find are really helpful. So as a leader, what I'm trying to do, how important is the thing that I feel so bad about. What's a good enough response? Who can help me? How can we change people's expectations? These are all part of what we can focus on. And then alongside survivor syndrome is this other one, imposter syndrome. It's something that people, I don't really belong here. I'm not good enough for this role. We can expect an explosion of imposter syndrome as well when people get back into their job roles. The anxieties and the self mistrust will be building up tremendously. If we can help organizations and our clients prepare for this in themselves, in their client, in their direct reports, this is really powerful and really helpful. And so, intriguingly, there is a difference, a male-female difference here. By and large, women tend to respond to imposter syndrome by trying to work harder and not make mistakes and work and be in more control of things. Men tend to deal with imposter syndrome by avoiding situations where they might get found out. While this is an absolute, it's just a trend in both directions. I think it's quite interesting. What is the likely response that you might have or your clients might have to imposter syndrome? And if we're going to help them deal with it, we have to name it. They have to recognize it. And all these other things, comparing, who do they compare themselves to feel negatively about themselves? Can they see themselves as the work in progress? What about the negative impact, self-image impacts that they have on themselves? But what about those impacts on other people? Can they learn to be more vulnerable? And all of these things, so in getting them to look at their expertise, looking at positive rather than negative goals, encouraging them to value self-doubts, and this thing about sharing what you value in them. So giving them the positivity from your observation of them and the strengths that they have. These are all things that can help somebody with imposter syndrome. And then the people who've left the organization. What we're seeing is that you can treat them as ambassadors. Let's make them people who feel like, okay, it was hard that I had to leave the organization, but it was a necessity and I still value being there and they still value me. So how do we create a new psychological contract with them? How does that fit with the organization's values? And when we talk about a boundaryless organization, what we mean is an organization where past employees, present employees, and future employees, there's very little distinction between them in the way that we communicate with them, in the way that we regard them and value them. This is something that organizations really need to do a lot more of. So helping the organization in the longer term, think about how do we actually work with it and have the policies and the abilities in place to respond rapidly before survivor syndrome gets in. So the internal coaches within the organization, the internal mentors, should have been working with people to predict as preemptively, and in some organizations they are. Underpinning all this, in the way that we think about this, is the work that we've been doing around teams and looking at teams as complex adaptive systems. And I'm just going to share with you a little bit about the Peril Model and how we use it in the context of helping teams come back to normal. So basically, if you think about a team as a complex adaptive system, everything that happens in the team is influenced by everything else. What a consultant will normally come in and do is say, well, you've got an issue with trust in the team. We'll work on trust. We'll do some trust building exercises. We might go away and do some team building or something like that. But the trust is only a symptom of much wider interplays of different things going on in the team. If you want to have much more significant and deeper impact on the team, something that's going to last, you need to be able to look beyond that, the patterns of interactions between key elements of what's happening in the team. And the 6 key elements that have come out from our research over the last 10 to 15 years are these ones. So the purpose and motivation of the team. What's the team there for? Does it energize people? What's going on in terms of the external systems too? You know, how do we listen to our stakeholders, for example? The relationships, do we trust each other? Is there high psychological safety? The internal systems and processes. So how do we make decisions? How do we, for example, what about quality? And so forth. How do we communicate? Then the learning issues. Are we evolving as fast as our environment needs us to? And then the leadership issues. When we talk about leadership, we're not talking about being the leader, the authority figure. We're talking about all those issues relating to the functions of being a leader. And interestingly, what we've discovered over recent years is that when we look at leadership functions, the things that are described as leadership functions, only 2 of them are reserved specifically or solely for a leader. Everything else can be done in part by the team. And the 2 that are reserved solely for leaders or for the designated leaders are getting sign-off for resources and other things from above, and representing the team to the powers that be, and protecting the team from interference from outside. Everything else can be shared amongst the team. It's distributed leadership. So if we take them one by one, how do we maintain purpose in lockdown? So we start to think about, what does the team do? Are we really all in agreement with that? How does the team purpose align with our own values? What can we find in this current situation of lockdown that we find that makes what we do still feel important and energizing? And how can we help each other maintain our energy and sense of purpose? These are fundamental questions. But helping a team think about this helps a team to build its resilience. And some of the tips and practical things we can do. What wouldn't happen if our team weren't here? What are our key contributions to the world? What would our stakeholders say? What can we take pride in? These are all questions to help the team think more deeply about who it is, or who it is as an entity, and where it wants to go. Then the external systems and processes. What about our stakeholders, and what are they worried about? Can we listen more deeply to them now than we ever have before? And can we build relationships with them for the future? Can we invest in them in this way? And what support can they provide us with now? Can we actually lean on them a little bit? And some of the other things, asking them, what do you need from us? What can we do together to support each other? How can we change the whole system, not just little bits of it, by integrating better or listening better to our stakeholders? Can we integrate our networks better? So build wider networks of support right now. These are all things that we can do that build upon those external relationships. And then the internal relationships. Can we show each other how much we care? Have we got enough trust? How can we improve it? What do we not talk about normally that we ought to be talking about now, that lockdown has given us an opportunity to bring to the surface? I love ending team meetings with the question, what's the one thing that needed to be said in this meeting, but nobody actually dared to say? It's a great team coaching question. And how can we use our diversity in the team to encourage to creativity rather than get in the way and create conflict? So some of the things that teams have done, having this daily check-in by text. What are your big challenges today? The things you're most looking forward to? What would you like help from? How can you get to know each other better? This asking for help. Helping colleagues by saying, there's one thing I'm going to do for you to improve, to support you over the period. It's a great team coaching tool that we have where you commit without telling them what it is to doing one thing for each of your colleagues that will make their life easier. And over the month, they're constantly looking out for that and they're wondering what it is. Then you have a conversation at the end of the month and you say to them, well, what do you think it was? And they say, well, it was this. You say, well, actually, it was this. And they say, oh, yes, that as well. What you've done is to change the dynamics so people are looking for positive actions by colleagues rather than negative ones. Just a simple tool, one of many that team coaches use. Then the internal systems and processes. How are we going to make them more consistent and align with the purpose and align with the values? So looking in how do we do things? Could we do them better? One of the things that we is get people to do lots of reading about better teamwork and to share it. And then look at the values. What's happening in the crisis that's actually challenged our team values? What can we learn from that? How can we preserve the team values and strengthen them as a result of what we've learned from this crisis? And then basically the learning issue too. There's a whole bunch of things here too, but what's the learning we want to take from lockdown? How will our competitors be adapting to the world after the crisis? Can we adapt better than they are? What are the gaps in our knowledge that we can see? We found it really helpful to get everybody to revisit their personal development plan and then to bring all those personal development plans together into a team development plan where we can support each other's development. It's a major shift in taking responsibility for each other rather than just for ourselves. And then the leadership. We're not going to willingly, in many cases, go back to a command and control. So how can we support leaders in experimenting, doing things differently, more collaboratively? And so in sharing leadership, what are the conversations that need to happen? What we're increasingly finding is that it takes, in many cases, a team coach or a coach to work with the team leader to help them have that conversation with their team. What do you need from me as a leader in order for you to be able to do your work most effectively? So this question here, what do you need from me to help you perform at your best? What do you need me to do more of and less of? And then the other side of this, how much responsibility from the team can the team take in terms of leadership in the future? These are all very powerful questions to ask, and coaching comes in very importantly into this. So we can also help the team and the organization think about its plan for re-entry. So how are we going to be stronger than normal when we get back to normal? How can we make sure we don't relapse into the old ways? What are we going to do with our stakeholders to help them see us differently? And what will they see? How can we use the resources we have to make that transition both rapid and effective and relatively painless free? Because if we're so close to normal now, or return to normal, if we're not planning these things now, then we're going to get left behind by people who are. And I think there's a great opportunity for coaches now to go out to all our clients and simply say to them, ask them these questions. What are you going to do? How are you planning for re-entry? And so we know that teams where everybody's willing to coach each other have greater resilience. So how can we help teams to move to that kind of culture? How can we help team leaders to take on that role of coaching everybody in their team and being coached by people in their team? How can we help them to create that team coaching, that teaming or culture and that coaching culture inside the team? If you're a team coach, you've got lots of opportunities to do this, and you have lots of a great toolkit for doing this. If you're a one-to-one coach, it's still okay, because there's masses that you can do in supporting that team leader in thinking about how they are going to behave differently, how they are going to build a different culture with their team. If you're going to try and coach the whole team with the team leader, you need a bigger, well, you need to be trained as a team coach. It's very easy to get, you have to find yourself isolated, where the only thing that unites the team is hatred of you. We've all been there. But there's a growing role now for working with the individual team leader, helping them think about how they're going to create that coaching culture in their team that is going to give them the wherewithal that the next time we have a crisis, the whole team and its leader will be so much better prepared. And that's really all I have to say. It's been a little bit of a gallop through all of this whole process, but thank you for listening.
Fantastic, David. Thank you so much. I don't know whether there's any time for questions and answers, that kind of thing, Q&A.
I'm happy. Yeah.
Yeah, would that be okay? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic, brilliant. So what we can do is we'll see. Obviously, there's quite a few of us because it's a webinar. But what we can do is we can give it a go in terms of people coming off mute to ask questions. If it gets a bit out of hand, I'll have my facilitator hat on to see if we can manage that in a sensible way. If not, then you please use the chat to add your questions, and then I'll facilitate it through the chat. But we'll see how we go. So if you do have a question for David, please come off mute, ask your question, and we'll see how we get along.
Hi, I have one. It's all right. So one of the things that you mentioned, David, earlier on was the question about creating that kind of supportive environment for the team. And just something that I think is quite interesting to explore is the balance between that kind of support and challenge. So, you know, how do we still create environments where we're doing really good work and we're energized and excited by it, but also nurtured and cared for and able to, you know, go with the kind of ebbs and flows that we've had to over the last, 12 months or whatever it is. And just interested in your thoughts, I guess, in exploring that space.
So, I'm not quite sure what the question is, Adrian.
Yes, it's not really a question. I think it's more just okay. So, when you're working with teams, you spoke a lot about creating that caring environment.
Yes.
I think now some organisations have gone quite well down that route, creating the caring environment, and maybe as a result not had the same element of motivation and results that they would
absolutely. Yeah.
And others have gone full throttle down the results piece, and everyone's feeling really frazzled. And it's just kind of, what's that bit in the middle? And just interested in your thoughts in how we explore that as team coaches.
Well, I think that we have to get away from all of these extremes, and one of the key things that we've determined for our studies of high performing teams is that whether they articulate it as such or not, everybody in the team takes responsibility for their own learning, their own performance and their own well-being, but also for the learning, performance and well-being of everybody else in the team. So it becomes a collective and shared responsibility. And as soon as you start to do that, you bridge that gap beautifully, because now everybody, you're caring for each other because that's part of the role, but you're also helping them to perform. And so we have this process we call BEAU teams, B-E-A-U, and it's business evolving as usual. And this is very close very close in philosophy to a lot of Agile. So the way that it works is that firstly, the old appraisal work done by the manager goes straight out the window. You trust the employee themselves to create to create on a 6-weekly cycle their own plan for development, and it's got 2 elements in it. It's going performance. So what am I going to achieve over the next 6 weeks? and learning what am I going to learn over, what I want to learn over the next 6 weeks. And then they go to all their stakeholders and they have a coaching conversation with that stakeholder about how they performed, how they did previous 6 weeks, and what they're trying to do in the next 6 weeks. And so you bring all that together, and they then go to their line manager and simply present that and say, this is what I'm doing. And the line manager may coach them as well. Maybe challenge them to be a bit more adventurous, but essentially, this is a process where coaching is the driver, rather than the old-fashioned judgment of performance management. And then every quarter in a BOW team, we have everybody comes together and you, just as you would have a sprint, for example, in an agile team, you now look at the experiments that you've been doing over the previous 3 months, and you take and you say, well, what worked, what didn't work, what do we want to drop, what do we want to continue, what do we want to change, and then you create your calendar of experiments for the next 3 months. So you're constantly experimenting. But also all of this and of course you're bringing all the individual development plans into the team development plan. So this is an engine that keeps growing, and it's a completely different environment.
Yeah, so it sounds like a commitment to dialogue and your personal learning backlog and a team learning backlog, and involving stakeholders and other groups in that as well, so that it's organizationally aligned for benefit the organization as well as the individual.
Yeah, I was interested to see in the chat that you talked about having a tool for transferring. So I think that's fascinating to share that with people. Yeah,
it does some of the similar things you're talking about. But yeah, thank you. Well, I've got other questions, but I'll let other people, because otherwise I'm sure I could just keep talking. So.
Thank you, Adrian. That's fantastic. There's certainly things there that I think we could develop at AWA as well. Brilliant. So I know that David Lowe, you have a question. Would you like to ask that?
Yeah, it was just a bit of clarification, David, about your slide that had about thinking about how you feel, thinking about how you think. I was there up until you got to feeling about how you think, and I don't know if you could just give us a bit more.
I can see if you raised that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it is quite it's cerebral, isn't it? But we tend to be aware of our emotions, but we only for example, but we're only aware of the dominant emotions. So there's a tool that we use called an emotional map that actually enables you to map a whole stack of emotions that are hidden, that you hadn't realized that you got, for example. So that's one part of feeling about how you feel. Thinking about how you think, we're into a single and double and triple loop learning, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So basically, it's trying to understand each of the way that you think and the way that you feel and the way that they interact with each other. And it's just the way that we've expressed it there is just a simple way of doing it, but it's actually much more complicated than that in reality.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that makes sense.
Well, it may when I contemplated it a bit more. It's one of those that maybe at 7 o'clock in the evening after a day isn't the best time, right? Yeah,
well, I usually find the thinking on these things goes well with a glass of something.
I'll take that as a justification for a bottle of wine being opened.
Absolutely. If you apply it to a particular situation, and where you maybe feel puzzled and confused about something, and you try and unpick the emotions and how the feelings that you have, and the way and the assumptions that you have, the way you're thinking about it, then you'll see it all come together.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for asking that. And so we have another question from Neela, if you'd like to come off mute. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. David, I've got a question for you just about how do you handle a situation where teams are made up of predominantly third-party consultants, not just employees of the company that you're coaching at? Because obviously the company probably doesn't want to spend a lot of their money coaching external parties, because but where I'm working, there's a lot of the teams are heavily, like 70% third party members.
The question is, the two questions here: do they want to become a team, and do they need to become a team? So you can have lots of the functions of a team as long as they are behaving in a teaming way. So are they collaborating? Are they sharing information that's needed? Are they supporting each other in appropriate ways? Are they actually learning together? For example, do they have the same sense on the Peril Model, for example? Do they exhibit all each of those elements that they need? So the trouble is, what happens so often is actually the whole thing falls down at the first hurdle, because they're all actually there for different purposes, particularly if they represent different parts of the organization, or they represent different consultants, and they're all trying to they may have an ostensible common purpose, but it's not the same as a shared purpose.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Okay. But obviously, I suppose we should be treating everybody the same when we're talking about people's, mental health or emotional health, whether they work for the company or not. I suppose so.
Absolutely.
Some of the rules will apply. Yeah.
But I think some of the things we can ask as coaches is simply, do you want to become a team? And how important is that you behave like a team, or can you get by being a group, which is perfectly feasible? And what support do you need from each other?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neela.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neela, for that. We have a question. Femi, did you want to ask a question? I know you raised your hand, but then you lowered it again, so I wasn't sure whether your question had been answered or not.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, David. In part, the question has been answered. It's probably along the lines of what Neela just shared there. Organizational impediments on how they constitute team members, and how they, we claim to be working in a transformed way of working, but the first thing we do is we divide and conquer, us and them. You belong here, you don't belong there. And straight away, they've divided the team. So rightly, as you mentioned, David, it depends. Do you want to be a team, or do you not want to be a team? What I found works for me in the past is having a team alliance, having a team contract, so that everybody agrees upfront to the contract. I mean, I don't mean coaching contract, but their ways of working. And when you now have situations where we have to revisit, i.e. when things are falling apart, and you now step in as a facilitator, you start off with the contract that they signed up to. So what I was reflecting on during the presentation, David, was when you actually mentioned that quote that you said, asking the team, what is the one thing that needs to be said that no one has mentioned? From your experience working with teams, when you take them to that point of safety, whether it's emotional, psychological, social, or emotional safety, do you find them opening up when you actually take them to that specific point? What needs to be said that hasn't been said?
It entirely depends on the existing level of psychological safety in the team. Sometimes we ask the team leader to go away, and so that we can actually ask questions like that. At other times, we just have to build up that level of psychological safety for a while. There is a technique that we use, which is so powerful. We ask everybody to write down the thing that nobody wants to talk about in capital letters, and then on the same piece of, everybody gets the same piece of paper, an indistinguishable piece of paper. You put them all together, you stir them around, and everybody goes down, and then you take one out. So it could be your issue, it could be anybody else's, and then you have to present the issue that you just pulled out as if it was yours. So you can't say, well, it says here. You've got to say, it's one of the, we really do need to face up to the fact that. And now the cat's out of the bag. And so what you've done is to make it safer for people to pinpoint these things. And what we identify is that the higher the level of psychological safety the team achieves, the more issues come out. Now, they may be not as big issues, but as they feel safer and safer, they actually allow more stuff to be revealed. And so, as part of as a team coach, we actually help the team to get the confidence to be able to do this. And it might take some time in many cases.
David, that's really interesting. Have you got? It sounds like a really great thing to do in real life when you've got bits of paper and hats. Is there a tool or a technique that you could recommend to do that remotely?
Well, yes. The only way we can do that is to use the team coach as a repository of this.
Okay, so everyone sends in their things anonymously to the team coach.
Yeah.
Then the team coach picks them out at random or something.
Yeah, like and sends them off to people randomly. Yeah.
Cool.
And that way you make jolly sure that nobody gets the one that their own.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool, thanks.
Fantastic, brilliant questions. Does anyone else have a question? I don't see any more raised hands. Is there? I haven't seen anything in the chat. So has anybody got any more questions for David? Feel free to come off mute.
If no one else does, I have another one.
Go for it, Adrian.
All right, cool. So I was interested in one of the bits you were talking about earlier with that kind of commitment to dialogue, but also the difference that you were talking about with men and women, generally building social capital in different ways. Because something I saw with a group I was working with, a couple of the guys didn't really want to engage in the conversations about, how we can be there for each other. They wanted to get in and work on stuff, right? But they didn't want to. So that kind of commitment to dialogue is quite interesting when people aren't actually inclined towards dialogue. I was wondering if there was, I don't know, any suggestions or thoughts that you had around what to do in situations like that.
I think we have to play to people's preferences as much as we can. And just as we'd work with different learning styles with a group, then I think we have to recognize different styles in this context as well. So we make it possible. So we will do both, but we will give them an opportunity, to play a lesser role in the dialogue and a stronger role in the doing.
It's nice. I think even just naming it, as you have, even just sort of noticing that and saying, okay, so this is a thing. And go, oh, okay, it's a thing then, fine. Then it enables you to have a bit of a conversation about it, doesn't it? And come up with a way that's going to work for the team. So, yeah.
I find one of the things I also do is I spend some time helping the team to understand the difference between debate, discussion, and dialogue.
Yeah.
And so once they get the notion that dialogue is about a sort of deeper conversation, then they can get engaged with that, because we're actually doing something. The doing here is so the together is actually creating something.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So we have one more question before we end. And it reminds me of an interview question that I remember being asked when I was younger, and that is, have you had any failures, anything that's gone wrong, so that we could turn into a learning experience, of course?
Loads and loads and loads. I think, as a team coach in particular, everything is unpredictable. I think most team coaching sessions, they'll come to a point where you're thinking, oh my God, what have I done? What do I do now? And that's one of the reasons why team coaching should only normally be done with 2 people, unless the team is very small, because you'll back up for each other. You can box and cox. But I find it's like with one-to-one coaching. If you know where the conversation is going, it's not coaching. And in the same way, if you can predict the way that the coaching conversation is going on with in team coaching, then you're actually in facilitation mode.
Yeah.
So it's that. So being prepared, expecting to be in that exposed place, and not knowing what to do, and needing time to reflect, and basically very often stopping the team and getting to say, okay, so this is interesting. What do we do now about this? So it's this, having the confidence to do that. Yeah, we all screw up all the time in team coaching, and we learn to be able to use those failures as experiments. And so the core of great teaming is to experiment and learn from experiments, not to expect everything to work first time. But yeah, I've been in situations where I think the biggest mistake that I made and learned and vowed never to make again was going into an organization where they had told me, yes, yeah, we'll tell you about how the team works and so forth. You just come in and do and run a coaching session for us. But of course, I had no idea. What they hadn't revealed was all the dirty linen. And you walk in there, and suddenly you find yourself in the midst of open warfare, and you're having pot shots taken at you as well every second. That's the kind of so the big lesson from that was always do your preparation, always go and interview people, get to understand the dynamics of this team before you set the foot over the threshold.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing all of your, all of this experience and all of this wisdom with us. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'm certainly taking away a huge amount from that. We'll be running a taster session with you, David. I think it's on the 25th of May around your course. So that there's a chance for people to register for that. There's only a few places, I understand, for people who genuinely want to come on the practitioner course. If you do want to come on the taster session, I've put an email an email address into the chat for people to get in touch to see if that's for you or not. Did you want to say one or two words about that, David? The taster session.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we'll introduce you to some of the tools and techniques we use and some of the basic theories. So we'll do a bit more on the Peril Model to explain how it works. And it's to give you a sense of what actually happens in a practitioner session. Well, so the foundation level is basically about understanding teams. So that's and how teams work, the dynamics of teams. The practitioner program basically takes you from the day that somebody pick up the phone or get an email saying come in and talk about team coaching to us, right the way through to the point where you basically exit. You do your Nanny McPhee moment, and disappear into the blue sky. And so it's step by step. We'll take you through the whole process.
Fantastic, thank you for that. So if you are interested in the taster session to begin with, I've stuck the email in the chat. Do feel free. It's training@adventureswithagile.com. Drop us a line, and we can have a chat with you and make sure it's the right thing for you. So I just want to thank, first of all, David. Thank you so much for giving us this time and your expertise and this and being so generous here. And also thank you to everybody else for taking this time to be with us here and to learn from David. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Go safe. And David Lowe and I both have an appointment with a glass of claret.
I might do too.
All over Simon's house. I'll bring the wine.
That's good to me. Take care, everybody. Have a fantastic evening, day, morning, night time, wherever you're from.
Bye then.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Simon.